Be careful how you are talking to yourself because you are listening. Hi everyone, Therese here. Welcome to this week's Karma Cards. I gotta tell you, it was hard to get to record the Karma Cards today. Not because I don't want to. In fact, wanting to is what got me here. We're in the shadow period of Mercury Retrograde. That's happening on January 14th. So what's today? Today is the 12th, in 2 days. So, words hard. Words very hard. We're going into that period we go into, I think it's 2 to 3 times a year, we go into a Mercury retrograde. Now, I know everyone puts that gloom and doom around it. It's because Mercury is one of the more fickle planets. Sometimes it's your friend, sometimes not so much. With Mercury retrograde, I always tell people the energy is turning inward. So everything that we do that it's externalizing starts to internalize. And communication, obviously, is something that we do to externally express to someone else. We are trying to communicate something inside of us to the outside world. So when Mercury goes retrograde, all of the desire to outwardly express starts turning inward into a type of reflection, to the point where you can be having a conversation in your head and think you're talking to somebody else, and then say half of it out loud, and the person's like, what? That makes no sense. And it usually starts these miscommunications, right? So then the person's like, that made no sense. And then if you're not aware that you're doing it, then you might be like, well, you make no sense. And then the whole bickering. It's easy to bicker during Mercury retrograde. This Mercury retrograde is happening in Aquarius, which is, again, the sign of the new age. Now, this is really interesting because while Mercury is in Aquarius, our thoughts are very Aquarian. The way we're thinking about communicating is very Aquarian. So the topics that you want to express might be really out there. I can see a lot of people talking about aliens right now, talking about starseeds, talking about other planets, talking about time loops and dimensional shifts and, other dimensions and all this, all the stuff, all the cool things, right? So that's one of the things that Mercury being in the sign of Aquarius does. It really heightens this expanded mindset. So Mercury is the air planet and Aquarius is an air sign. So they're actually quite suited to each other. So Mercury has quite a bit of energy in Aquarius. So again, it's expansive thinking. It's thinking outside the box. It's inventive thinking, problem solving or coming up with solutions or new ways to do things. It's going to clip right now. A lot of that's going to be internalized. Now, the shadow side of Aquarius is that it can be quite emotionally detached. That's not great when you're in a Mercury retrograde, right? Not only are you internalizing and inventing and thinking far off things in your mind, but then that desire to be emotionally aware with other people might not be there so much. Making it easier, I think, to sort of be short with people, blunt, brusque, or maybe just say the truth, but in a sort of an what's the word I'm looking for? It's there's no softness to it. It's a hard edge. It's here's the hard truth about you. Boom. Right? And that can cause the squabbling and the issues to come up. So the key word always during the Mercury retrograde is to practice listening. Listening is the key word, and the practice is listening and trying to listen more than communicate. Now, like I said, communicate we might be actually have no problem not speaking very much. And that brings me back to why it was hard to show up, because I am already doing it. I'm internalizing so much. I feel like I talk to you all day long before I actually record it. So sometimes by the time I get here, I'm well, I said everything I had to say. Didn't you get the telepathic video I sent you? So, right? It's kind of like the wheels are churning, the thoughts are going, we're working out things in our head while on the outside people are asking us, what do we want from the grocery store? And we are like, huh? Like, oh, the grocery store is not important right now. Right? Someone's trying to do something nice to you. That's an example that kind of happened this evening where I was like, oh yeah, groceries, great. I'm working on something. We're works in progress, right? So, keyword is listening. This is also a great opportunity to really listen to the thoughts running rampant in your own mind. Who is in there and who's talking? We sort of envision ourselves as a singularity, like we're one being and there's only one being inside of us, and that there's just one conversation going on. But if you actually stop and think about it, you are a multidimensional being, and you are more like a faceted gemstone with many facets. I'm like looking for one I can show you. Like, oh man, you look more like this, right? Than this guy. Than this little, like this guy looks like a singularity. This guy looks like there's so many versions of this baby that you could experience, and that's really like you. There's so many versions of you in there, and I talked about it last time when we were talking about the inner child. That's just one aspect of who could be in there. Now, as we go through our life experience, we fragment. So the best description my team ever gave me to describe this is, imagine that before you entered this world, you were more like a smooth mirror. And I'd like to take that one step back, maybe before you entered this world the first time. So some of us have come again and again to help out, to help move the frequency, to shift things around, or to because we got sucked into the experience to heal from the last time we were here, right? So the first time you came in, imagine that's this perfectly smooth, perfect mirror. And then you come into this world and in some cases, the first interaction you have creates a crack. And then as you go through the experience, you get more cracks. If you have, trauma happen, cracks, to the point where chunks of the mirror break off, and these create the fragments. And when we're looking at like the shamanic path of healing, that whole practice is about retrieving fragments so that you can reunite and have that mirror all the way together again. So I want you to think about that idea of fragmentation and the fact that you're a multidimensional being. Now, some of these are fragments. Some of these are compartmentalized parts of you where at one point or another you had to put that away because it wasn't appropriate, or someone told you it was wrong, or da-da-da-da. There's all these different reasons why we can compartmentalize parts of ourselves. And then new parts develop because nature abhors a vacuum. So if you put your bravery aside, let's say, like you're courageous or your fearlessness, if that is something that gets squashed because you should be afraid of things, then another part comes in, which is the protector. Maybe it acts as like a police officer, making sure that that fearlessness stays in its box and doesn't come out. So as you can see, we get all these different aspects that start to happen. We're not a singularity. We're not a unified field. We are a little fragmented. This is okay. Ultimately, it's all going to be okay because more and more we're becoming consciously aware of how to unify. And of course, there are many beings here who are healers, who've been healing for lifetimes. They've been doing healing work for lifetimes. And the knowledge that the healers carry with them is how to create the unification. But let's go back to the idea that there are different aspects of you. Some of these aspects agree with your desires. Some of them don't. And the reason I bring this up is because with communication being so internalized, it is going to be about the story going on in your head. it is going to be about the parts of you that aren't gelling and coming together. For example, like a personal example is I've been working on some projects, and both projects came to like kind of a screeching halt. Like I was clipping along and then suddenly hit the wall and there was no movement. And so I tend to just put things down. I'm like, okay, if I can't get movement here after trying and trying, I'm just going to put it down. I'll work on something else just to keep the juices flowing. I'll go where there's less resistance. But some of these things I want to get completed. I have an idea and I'd like to put it out there. And so it wasn't until I actually sat down and had an internal conversation with myself about, okay, I have resistance. There's a part of me that's resisting this, even though there's so many other parts of me that wants to continue working and is excited and sees its potential. There are parts of me that are like, nope, I'm not doing that. We're not going there. I don't want to go there. Traditionally, we all have this. I'm sure this is a very relatable story. Traditionally, it depends on the type of personality you are. Some of us are really driven, right? So we'll push ourselves. Those are the workaholic types. Those are the A types. Those are the people who are like, come hell or high water, I'm going to get this done. But what that ends up doing is you're sort of bulldozing a part of yourself in order to get what you want. And so therefore there's always this part of you that feels out of alignment with it and maybe resentful. So anybody who's relating to this, think about, especially towards your work, you can really see it there. If you really pushed yourself to do something and it was like it used to be joy and then all the joy got sucked out of it, that's kind of a sign that what I just said happened, that there was a part that wasn't in agreement, and instead of trying to understand that part, you just are like, shush, stop, we're doing this, and you're coming whether you want to or not. And then that resistance, believe it or not, you think you've overcome the resistance, but the resistance is sort of like growing in the background of like, fine, we're doing this, but now I really hate it. Now I really resent having this in my life. And then you'll end up experiencing it around something that you used to find so much joy about. So the antidote to a situation like that, and really you can kind of apply this to other situations. This is just an example. But the antidote is to actually want to meet and listen to the part of you that's not on board. And that's where this time period, I feel like you can really use Mercury retrograde to your advantage, because if you allow this and sit with this part of you, and it's hard. You're going to have to acknowledge that you're not listening. You might have to apologize even. And you definitely have to be in a place where curiosity and learning is more important than a means to an end. Like, I'm going to defeat this resistance so I can get what I want, because that part's never going to be on board if that's your approach. So it's almost like the need to understand needs to be greater than getting your desired outcome. When you do that, you're going to learn some amazing things about yourself. You're going to learn that resistance isn't necessarily a part of you that is negative or lazy or uncooperative or unwilling. It's got its own agenda. It's doing things for a reason. Once you learn that reason, you can then have a conversation with that part of yourself about how you'd like to handle it and how you'd like to honor that part's feelings while showing that part the benefit of what you desire. So I did that today. I did all that work. I know it sounds like a lot. It actually only took 20 minutes or less to do it. And instantly, the creative gates opened up again and the work started pouring right out. So I want to offer that to you because we have time between now and then the retrograde ends February 3rd, and then we have like a week of shadow after that. So we've got some time to work on this. And I feel like it's a more productive way to use this energy rather than sitting there stressing out about it. it might be stressful. And you have to remember too that we're all experiencing it. So there are some of us who are conscious of it and are like, oh, right, I got to slow down. I got to think about what I'm trying to communicate. I've got to ask more questions. I've got to try to listen more. Some of us do that. Some of us they don't know, don't care, don't believe it, whatever, but they're still affected by it, which means that, our tendency to cut people short or be emotionally detached or be a little too blunt might be something we try to curb, but someone else might not. So again, there's the self-care and the tending to your own feelings and the recognizing that you don't have to take that. At the same time, there's this awareness like they know not what they do. Like they don't understand that they're under an influence of an energetic. And so trying to be in a place of compassion while, slowing things down. So in conversations, we try to slow things down. We really try to listen. We ask more questions. We repeat back what we hear, because that repeating back what you hear the person says allows them to know that you received what they're saying, or it helps them to correct what, if you're hearing it one way and they're saying it another, it allows them the opportunity to clarify. So with that, just understand that, you're watching this. This is giving you the opportunity to sort of be the one who's more observant and self-aware. When you're in interactions with people, it's like you're the guide. You're the one guiding the conversation by your own example, by having that self-awareness and having the grace to hold space for people who might not. And the chance of them gaining that self-awareness is greater in your presence. And so thank you for your service. And just know that during this time, there is actually quite a bit of understanding and multi-dimensional magic going on. So with that, let's do some karma cards. If you're new to karma cards, let me quickly show you how these work. I have 3 decks here: planets, signs of the zodiac, and houses of astrology. And I've already asked the team, what is the message you have for us this week? And I've got 2 sets of answers, one in red, which is action related, and a set in blue, which are outcome related. And the way that you play is you tune in intuitively, feel into what do you need this week, action related answers or outcomes. And of course, you can always choose both. And while you're choosing, let me tell you the timing for this reading. This reading is for January 12th through the 19th. And the flavor of this reading. Okay, so we've got Pluto, which I've been talking about. Pluto, ruler of the underworld, also the power purge planet, and here to create transformation, whether you want it or not, because you need it. You might not want it, but you need it. In the sign of Libra. Now let me feel into this. It's not, Libra is definitely, I'm happy Libra's here because Libra creates that sense of balance. It's harmonizing. It wants cooperation, and it's a really good communicator. It's one of the air signs, and it's probably one of the best communicators in the zodiac. And here we got the 12th house again. So the last week we got the 12th house. This is the subconscious mind. It's also ruling over those large, overwhelming events. So this is like the big shift. Now, Pisces rules this 12th house. So there's a lot of mysticism. There's a lot of mystery and mysticism connected with this house too. But this is talking about something greater than you can control as well. So we're talking about our subconscious mind, which is greater than you can control, as well as these big events happening that are out of our control. So let's see what it says. All right, for those who are choosing action, your spiritual action at this time is to resurrect relationships seeking oneness with all there is. Oh, that's a good one. When it comes to ascension, oneness is the goal. Just remember that. The whole ascension's like going up a giant mountain, and the peak is oneness. It's returning to the understanding that everything and all there is connected and one. And so therefore, nothing that's happening outside of you is actually outside of you. And we want we are working and working, especially as we move deeper into fourth density. And I'm working on my podcast about this. As we move deeper into fourth density, our concern for others becomes greater and greater because we are distinctly aware that what's, taking care of what's good for someone else is actually taking care of us. We don't distinguish that difference anymore, the deeper and deeper we go in. So here's the path we're on. Here's the transformation. Start seeing other people's needs as your own, and then trying to meet those, which means that to resurrect relationships. This one is about definitely looking at how much are you playing the game of separation, and how much are you recognizing that we are reflections of each other, where we reflect the same thing ultimately. So again, it's that movement towards unifying, and it's that awareness of like, how much effort or energy do I put in being different, separate, apart from, or how much energy am I putting towards unity, harmony, and balance. Mental action at this time. Get to the heart of beauty, of the beauty of philanthropy. So see, that's kind of reinforcing the last statement. The beauty of philanthropy is you recognizing that another's needs are just as important, and that when we are in contact with others, that awareness of meeting those needs is primary for the harmony and the flow and the movement and the unification. It's not just a one-time thought, it's an activity, it's an action task. So philanthropy becomes less about just a charitable giving, like here's something for you, and then I move on my way. We start to see like, no, that philanthropy is actually a way of being, philanthropy being the path of service to others. So it's really asking us to meditate in that and get in, like, what is that, right? And it's one of those things where it's an and situation. So we're not talking about just other people's needs and then totally, I don't exist, I have no needs, I'm a monk. That's actually not how we move forward, because then we're still dismissing a part of creation. We're dismissing us. So it's us and them. And that is the heart of philanthropy. It's the heart of service to others. So we're asked to mentally meditate on that right now. Physical action. Do or die. You must do it with your partner and keep your involvement hidden. You can hear that any way you want to, and it's probably accurate. All right. I really feel like, in regards to what the topic we were talking about in the Mercury Retrograde and focusing on conversation and listening. Again, so I said earlier, like, people who are watching this, you're the ones who have that self-awareness of what's going on, the energies that are playing out, paying attention to, am I slowing down? Am I trying my best to communicate? Am I really listening? The spirit world saying, you don't need to go and tell it, you don't need to put your hand on someone's shoulder and be like, listen, I know you're being blunt and rude because it's Mercury retrograde and you have no mental control of what you're doing or saying, but, right? So that's keep your involvement hidden. They don't need to know that I'm being more consciously aware than you right now, right? That's more of an extreme example. It's just, this is something we all should be practicing anyway. The art of listening is an act of wisdom, right? So we should just be practicing it daily. It's just even more important now. It's more important if you want to sort of have a smooth sailing course right now. Otherwise, the water gets really choppy in this period of time. So again, it's like you're practicing this because this is your way of being moving forward, versus because it's a time period that you're just trying to navigate easily. Now let's look at outcomes for Pluto in Libra in the 12th house of the subconscious mind. So this is where the outcomes also tend to talk about what's going to happen from doing the inner work. So when we're looking at actions, we're really being shown the inner work, when we're looking at outcomes, we're seeing the results of that, which usually reflect somehow into the outside world. So the spiritual outcome at this time is a need for control of cooperation to perfect your faith. Okay? Pluto, the controller here, the power planet, that urge, the urge to create cooperation. Otherwise, I lose faith in everything. If I can't control this cooperation, then none of this works, right? Okay. No, that's an urge that's going to kick in. So maybe let's say you take this message to heart. You're like, I'm going to heed the Mercury retrograde advice, and I'm going to really try to understand it. I'm really going to try to listen because I desire cooperation, and this really is how I want to move forward. I'm down with it. I'm so for it. And you put out that effort and you get nada back. You get short, clippy responses. You get people who refuse to like kind of understand where you're coming from, or there's a lot of bluntness, or, just it's kind of cold, chilly, people just ghosting you, stuff like that. Might make you go, well, this shit doesn't work. Like this, why should I do this? Clearly it's not making an impact. So that desire to try to, I'm going to behave so you behave, desire looks like it's a part of this process. So we just got to know that. That'll be a feeling to come up that we may need to process. I'm behaving so you behave, right? Or I'm doing this the right way and you're doing it wrong. Just allow, if that's happening, just recognize that's just a motive. It's part of the ego. The ego is the controller, right? Wants that control. And we have this idea of reciprocity just because, like I did it so you should do it is a thought that we have. I mean, we're also trained with that psychologically on a social level. Like everything should be even Steven, which is not how the universe works. But the universe usually manages to even things out in its own way, right? Does it make sense for everybody to be, imagine a world where everybody's a chef. Just everybody's a chef. Nothing else gets done because everybody's a chef because everything has to be even. Well, that might sound great for some, but everybody's cooking. There's never food, there's never supplies, because everybody's cooking and no one's appreciating because everyone's cooking, right? So we've got to see that this idea of fairness as a social program and construct doesn't exist. There is balance though, which is not the same as fairness. So if that comes up in us where we're like, I'm doing it and you're not, and that's not fair, acknowledge, realize that your actions are for a higher purpose, right? It's for your own personal growth journey. And whether or not anyone else understands that or appreciates that, the understanding and appreciation on another's part of you is like a bonus when they do it. You're just doing the work because that's where you're going and that's where you want to go. And it will even out. We're in that weird period between third and fourth. Some people are in fourth, some people are still in third. Some people go all the way down to second again. Some people are trying to go to fifth, right? All these densities happening together. So it's not even, but it's going to even itself out over time. I hope that makes sense. Mental outcome at this time, an obsession with decisions about hidden tendencies. Yeah, okay, so here's another thing that could happen during this period. Being so aware, so focused on what's going on in here that it becomes, obsessive, but distracting, right? Like we're like over analyzing. That's what I want to say. We are over analyzing every thought we're having, how am I interacting right now? How am I doing? Am I doing well? Did I do it right? Who's that in there thinking that? Why can't I just move forward? When we're, with Mercury retrograde in an air sign, which is a mental sign, that's a lot of internal mental stimulation. So during this period, we're also going to need to find the balance, getting out of the head. So it's kind of like we're asking to notice if we're being transactional with the first one, need to control. The second one is be aware of the tendency to overanalyze at this time. So it's like if you need to do it right, that do it right thing happening. It's time to get out of your head. So how do you get out of your head? For me, it's like get deep into some art, get into some meditation, get out into the woods, go for a walk, right? Move the body, get out of the head for a while. And that's going to like take this pressure off, because the analyst is very much alive when Mercury's in Aquarius. The analyst is brilliant. She's observant. She's taking all the metrics and the data. And from that she creates something. It's amazing. It is exhausting. And I want you to think of like A Beautiful Mind. Do you remember that movie? That one? I wish I had that graphic with the scene where it's like all the like weird writing, like the mathematic equation. We can get like that, obsessive and so focused on it, hyper focused. And that's just going to bring us back into a lower energy of almost feeling trapped in the head. So it is important that we focus on, how do I balance this? How do I walk away from it for a while? It's really hard to walk away from your own internal thinking unless you realize that moving the body, working up a sweat, being in nature, meditating, a hot bath, like turn things off and shut off internally for a while so that you don't go into the overly analyzing, obsessive place. You don't need to. It's going to feel like you need to because of the influence of the energy, but we don't. Physical outcome at this time, a power struggle resulting from the fairness shown by large institutions or overwhelming events. So again, this is that the reflection into the external world, the things that we can't control. So again, there's these bigger events going on that feel out of our control. And with Pluto present in this reading, there is a desire to control. I want to have the power in this situation. What I get is that there is actually fairness is coming in these big events. We might not be able to see the hand of it, or it might not look the way we expect it to look. And that's the power struggle there. Like I can't let go of my desired outcome, my desired intention. Again, the universe has a way of balancing everything out and evening it out. It's not always on our timeline. And with all this mental energy, that feeling of unrest, and again, Aquarius is the sign of the humanitarian as well. So there is going to be this hyper focus of what's best for everyone. And we might not be seeing it yet. It is coming. I strongly get that the fairness that needs to return to this world, or the balance or the humanity that needs to return, it's on its way back, but it's not looking like what we expect it to look like, and that's because it's requiring our participation all the time. We are creator beings. That's why humanity is special. We are creator beings. And guess what is creating? It's our subconscious mind. Our collective consciousness is a part of that. So really quickly, the iceberg metaphor, right? So icebergs, if you look at them, you see the peak above the surface. And then if you look below the water, you see the bigger part of the iceberg. And then if you were to go even deeper down, you'd see that the icebergs are connected. And so what we're looking at there is the conscious mind at the top, subconscious mind in the water beneath it going very deep. And at the deepest level is that super consciousness, the collective conscious mind is in there. Right? And this is what is creating. We're creating at all these levels, not just the one that we're aware of. We're creating a majority of it with this subconscious mind. And then on a deeper level that we can't even like fathom or see, we're collectively creating this together. So the part that wants control is this little bitty part up here. And its awareness of what's really going on under the surface is very limited. It cannot see very far. So we need to, again, so what does that mean? Well, you've got to put it in God's hands. You've got to put it into the universe's hands. a higher power, right? Understand that I don't know how this works out in a way that is working for all beings. I trust that God, the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, has got this. I trust that. I don't know how it works. And a lot of times what I'm seeing is that the universe, God, works in mysterious ways. It's got a cure for everything. And those cures don't always look like what we think they're going to do. For example, I've seen that the cure for ridicule has been to be ridiculed. I've seen that. I've watched it play out. So if you want to get over a fear of being ridiculed, be ridiculed. You'd think it's like kindness. You'd think it's kindness. That's really, I know we're all like, no, it's kindness. No, that hasn't happened. Like that hasn't happened. We have not seen universal kindness. What we have watched is universal ridicule. And I've watched people transform. I've watched them actually root deeper into their internal power in themselves because of the relentless ridicule. And I'm like, oh my God, there's the hand of God. I would not have thought that that's how you fix it, but it's like, it is so, when you're inundated with it constantly, it's not that it's not painful or disappointing. It's really that you turn, what's your choice? To fall apart or become stronger? And it's like why they say, why Cortez burnt the boats. Cortez burnt his fleet's boats so they would take the island. Now, they were already sailing to this island and they were getting off the boat and they were intending to take it over. But to make sure that they did, he burnt it to the ground. And so rather than finding sovereignty through nothing but, kindness in others, people found sovereignty through being mocked and ridiculed and told they were wrong and told, their perspective is irrational or irrelevant. And instead of letting that break them, it just deepened the resolve. And once you have that deep resolve, it's like nothing can shake you. And that's what it looks like. So before we decide that we know how this beautiful transformation happens, I think we have a few more surprises in store where we're not going to see that coming, and yet it's the exact thing that we needed to get us to where we want to go. So that kind of goes back to what I've said in the karma cards earlier about polarizing to the positive frequency. When you're moving more service to others, to that end of the spectrum, a lot of people think life gets easier. It's happier, it's easier, it's more flowy, and it's not. It's actually a tighter pathway. You don't have as wide a berth because the more consciously aware of your own behavior you become, the more you have to stay in alignment with that. Integrity becomes even more important the higher you go in frequency. Not only that, but it can be sort of an unforgiving path in the fact that, and this goes right to the card reading this week, that you're doing everything you can to stay high in frequency, high in alignment, wish well on others, not take on negativity, not send out negativity, and yet it's like life will knock at you. And part of it is it's really hard to continue when you're not seeing that return. And there's a lot of mythology that talks about this absolute trust, even when it looks like nothing's going the way you expect it to. There's this trust, this integrity, there's staying the path, stay the course, right? A really good example of this is the myth of Odysseus. I think that's the name, Odysseus and Eurydice. Odysseus was the lyre player. He played the most beautiful music in the world. And his wife died right before they got married. And so he managed to go down to Hades to retrieve her. And he was able to play the music for Pluto. And it made, I think, Persephone weep, which is, Pluto's bride. And so he agreed to let his wife come back with him. But the deal was he could not turn back and look at her until they were both at the surface. And at first, walking that path was easy. He was like, I know she's behind me. We're here. I totally trust it. But the closer and closer he got to the surface, the more and more the doubt creeped in. Like, what proof do I have that she's here? What if he tricked me? What if this is, all for nothing? And the closer and closer he got to the surface, the more stressed out and suspicious and doubtful he became, till he was at the last step and he just couldn't take anymore, and he turned around and he looked at her and she was right there. But because he didn't keep his deal of waiting till they were at the surface, she faded and was pulled back in, which is sad. It's a sad story, but it's similar to walking a path with higher energy. There's a part of you that knows what the payoff is. There's a part of you that understands that that to work on raising your frequency and staying there is not only going to be a personal payoff, but it actually helps the planet as a whole. As you're doing the work, day after day, returning to a higher frequency, cleaning up the mind, opening the heart, all of this stuff. As you're doing that and you're looking around and you're seeing horrible behavior or horrifying events happening, and you're like, what the hell? I'm working so hard. I'm putting so much out and I see nothing in return. That's where that moment of like doubt creeps in and starts to unfurl. And yet we're still being asked to walk the path, right? Continue, keep going until you get to the surface, just like Orpheus. And it takes a lot of faith. And so what happens is, as we're walking this higher path, the more faith we have to have. But faith constantly gets tested. It gets tested. There's no proof. I can't prove to you what faith is. You just decide you have it. And the higher we go in frequency, the tighter the path becomes. So it's easier to fall off. Honestly, it's kind of baffling. It's kind of baffling, which is why there's so much leeway, actually, on the path of service to others. There's quite a bit. They say in the Law of One, you only have to achieve it 51% of your life. That means for 49%, you can be absolutely self-absorbed, selfish, worried about your own needs, no one else's. But 51% of the time, you're concerned with other people. They allow you to graduate into the next density with only 51%. I'm talking if you want to go 75, 80, 90%, the path gets tighter and higher, and your understanding of faith and knowing that what the eyes are seeing isn't necessarily reflecting what is truly happening. And you only can see it in hindsight. So everything you are seeing with your eyes right now is a result of all the behavior that came before it. Everything. All the events that came before, it's culminating up into this energy. What we do now, what we're doing in the present moment, how we are generating our energy from what we're seeing right now is going to create something very different next. We are not going to instantly experience it. We're going to see it in hindsight. We turn back and we're like, oh, that's what it did. When I started focusing in this way, that's what shifted in my life. Now I see it. Now I see it in the world. And so, interestingly enough, faith is one of the keys of this week's reading. So, your faith will be tested. Things will be happening in a way that may not look like it's actually evening out, or it might. And again, there's many perspectives about what's happening. Not everyone's in agreement yet. Not everyone sees the same thing. The evening out I'm talking about hasn't fully come into form yet. It's coming more into form all the time. So some of us might react to events in a way where like finally, and others might have a very different reaction. We just have to understand that no matter what it looks like, it's getting us to a certain point and it's divinely orchestrated. Just keep putting in your orders about the kind of life you want to experience. What do you want to see? What do you want to see in the world? Right? Keep putting that out there. Have faith it's being heard. It's being taken into account because your opinion absolutely matters. to the universe. Absolutely it does. The universe, God doesn't create anything arbitrarily. Everything's created on purpose. So of course, your perspective matters. Keep putting that out there and relax into the faith that it's being heard and acted on and considered. And with that, I send you so much love. Mwah. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.